If you're anything like me, then your video game backlog is huge. I have tons of great games in mine, and I think it's finally time I did something about it. This is DX's Backlog, a series dedicated to sharing my experience with games that I wish I hadn't waited so long to play. Today, for our first episode, we're going to be taking a look at BioShock, the 2007 classic from Ghost Story Games, formerly known as Irrational Games. But before that, if you'd like to talk about BioShock or discuss any of your favorite games with like-minded people, head on over to the DX Discord server. You can tell us about the games you love, you'll receive amazing wallpapers, and hopefully make some new friends along the way. You can find us at discord.gg/dxfromy. Now, let's dive to the depths of Rapture. There are many words one could use to summarize BioShock. My immediate thought is to say that BioShock is amazing. And while that's true, I think a better descriptor of the game is special. BioShock is a special game, but it might surprise you to find out that the first time I tried playing it, I wasn't really a big fan, to the point where I only barely made it halfway through the game. So, what changed? How did I go from not liking BioShock to thinking it's one of the coolest games I've ever played? Well, when I originally tried it, I think I wasn't paying attention to a lot of what makes BioShock work. I had just come off a huge spree of other first-person shooters, and I thought BioShock was going to be like them, but it wasn't. It was considerably more narrative-focused, it had a very different structure, and I genuinely believed that all the games I'd played in the genre before did everything much better. I ended up dropping BioShock and not having any real interest in finishing it. In the years since then, though, I actually developed a love for games with that larger focus on story, and now I'm definitely a lot more open to those that offer experiences outside of what I'm used to. Today, I also enjoy games for what they are, rather than what I want them to be. The problem was never BioShock, it was me, and I just needed to have the right attitude towards it to properly experience it. So when I went back to BioShock recently, it felt like I was playing it for the first time, because I could finally see it the way I should have back then. I found myself totally entrenched in the incredible world of Rapture and its story. It's rare when a game impresses me. Even some games that I love and think are great, I am not necessarily impressed by, but I can say without a shadow of a doubt that BioShock impressed the hell out of me. I'll go even further and say that I'm surprised that most of what's in this game was achievable in 2007. Things like the scope of Rapture, the game's first-person storytelling, and most importantly, how the game builds on the FPS formula. In Irrational's early pitch for BioShock, written in 2002, it was described as an FPS plus, and that's exactly what the game is. It is a first-person shooter, but one that incorporates elements from other genres to diversify its gameplay and strengthen the presentation of its narrative. The most obvious way BioShock diverges from the FPS contemporaries of its time is in its combat. The game changed not only how it allowed you to fight enemies, but why you were facing them in the first place. Every enemy encounter in BioShock is transactional. You're not just mowing down splicers to get to the end of the level. You need to engage with them in order to participate in the game's economy in any meaningful way. Of course, that's the beauty of the Big Daddy. They carry an exclusive currency in the form of Adam, and the only way to progress the player's strength and choices in combat is to fight them. How you fight the Big Daddies is up to you. They're a roaming boss encounter that doesn't engage you until you engage them. This shift from the typical shooting gallery in first-person shooters also played a huge part in the player's perception of Rapture. BioShock's level design is more survival horror than first-person shooter. In FPS games, you typically only move forward, but in BioShock, there's backtracking and rooms like in Resident Evil. The game wouldn't be the same without this design. We could never appreciate the detail of Rapture if we were just zooming through every level. Because we have to backtrack, and because we are encouraged to explore, We absorb Rapture a lot better than if it was a standard corridor shooter. It's nearly impossible to not be immersed by the game's art direction and set dressing, which makes Rapture feel like a real place. BioShock also allows us to interact with Rapture, and these small interactions are logical, and the things we expect to happen, happen. Even the NPCs have interactivity with the world. If a splicer is on fire and runs into water, they're no longer on fire. Though BioShock isn't quite an immersive sim, it's still complex enough to where you can consistently play around with its mechanics to create unique situations. With that said, I do think at times that BioShock's design is communicated a bit too obviously. But I also say that with the foresight of having played more complex games and having played them all in a much shorter time span than anyone would have at the time of BioShock's release. The things you're meant to do in BioShock seem obvious now, but at the time and in the context of BioShock being the first FPS plus on console, its numerous indicators were much needed. In fact, they are the direct result of early playtesting where players didn't really understand what they were meant to do with features like plasmids. Despite this, the game doesn't hold your hand or limit you on how you can use these abilities. You can still be incredibly creative, even though the game's intentions are clear. Now, I can't talk about BioShock without mentioning how brilliantly it was constructed from a development standpoint. BioShock was made by a small team, but you'd never know that because Rapture is huge. Or is it? The game uses so many clever tricks, in unison with its amazing art direction and level design, to make you think Rapture is a much bigger and more realized place than it really is. Seeing busted pipes everywhere and the entire city leaking does an amazing job of convincing you that you're really in this massive underwater city. BioShock taking place underwater also saved the team a lot of time from having to construct exterior environments that the player could otherwise easily have seen in daylight. Every level does have glimpses of the outside of Rapture, but they're usually just textures. This projection effect is typically used to simulate insides of windows, but BioShock uses it to simulate the outside of Rapture. A man chooses, and a slave obeys. The story of BioShock is captivating, and the game does such a wonderful job of creating characters through audio and environmental storytelling. I didn't need Andrew Ryan or Atlas to tell me they existed in this world. I could see it. I loved learning about what happened in Rapture, stories of different shades that all paint the same picture. The collapse of the city under the weight of hubris, greed, and hypocrisy. My very lucky break with BioShock was that the first time I tried playing it, I made it to the Hephaestus level, but not to the game's big reveal. I am very glad that I didn't experience this game's twist with the attitude I had towards it back then. When I played through it now, it totally blew my mind. It worked, and it's so damn good. I immediately understood why people still talk about BioShock's story and what helped make this game special. I am so happy that I finally played BioShock. It's introduced me to an incredible new universe, and I can't wait to play the rest of the franchise. If you have not played it, I highly recommend BioShock. It's a piece of gaming history that I think everyone should experience at least once. Remember, if you have a backlog, don't hesitate to get started on it. I know it can be easy to keep playing the one game you're always playing, or to go from new release to new release, but the experience you're looking for, or didn't even know you wanted, may be buried in the games you haven't gotten to yet. Games give us perspective, and every game I play teaches me something and slightly changes the way I view everything else. Just start with one game, and in no time you'll have gone to countless faraway lands and had invaluable fun along the way. Thank you for watching DX's Backlog. I'll see you next time.